All right, let's go to the economic news today. The headlines there, the Reserve Bank has left interest rates on hold, second month in a row. Here's Sky News business editor Ross Greenwood. Well, Ross, we know inflation's still a long way north of where we need it to be, but do you think we're out of the woods here?
Well, not yet. I don't think so. And even though many economists are now wondering whether this will be the last of the rate rises, the reality is that while you've got an inflation rate monthly, at least on an annualised basis of 5.4%, and you've got a cash rate of 4.1%, that really, it's not where America is, for example, where right now the cash rate is higher than its annualised inflation rate. And that's the reason why, though the Reserve Bank quite clearly is looking to see what the economic data will do and what these 12 interest rate rises Australians have endured will do to consumption and will do to the economy overall, there's no doubt that it's still leaving really the bias towards raising interest rates again in the future. Particularly, it notes rents are rising, it notes that the services industry inflation is rising there, and you get a sense that they're really trying to at least keep the prospect of another interest rate rise in their quiver simply because they might need it.
Look, I need you to pull this one apart for me today. I read reports that there's a number of coalition MPs who are encouraging Peter Dutton to oppose Labor's move to force the Reserve Bank to equally now weight unemployment and inflation when it looks at the official cash rate. Why is Labor pushing this change? What's the rationale for it? And if it gets up, what are the sort of implications that you might be concerned about?
Okay, so one of the things about the mandate for the Reserve Bank even now is it's got to try and maintain economic stability in Australia. It's got to also try and have that inflation target we know about of between 2 and 3%. And to be fair, there is also something about trying to maintain employment in the nation. So it's already got something built in there. But under the new rules, what would occur is it would have to give equal weight to the prospect of full employment and also the inflation targeting of 2 to 3%. And that's got some senators on the coalition side concerned. Remember, Angus Taylor and the coalition have indicated up until now that they are prepared to agree to the new terms for the Reserve Bank on a bipartisan basis. And that's certainly something that the government would want. But then you've got people, well, you know, you've got Matt Canavan from the Nationals, you've got Andrew Bragg coming out and saying, well, hang on, how does this actually work? And it is difficult because one of the problems here is what is full employment. At the moment, you've had the Reserve Bank incoming Governor, Michele Bullock, saying she thinks it's around 4.5%. You've got unions at the moment saying that they think it's got a 3 in front of it. Unemployment at the moment close to 3.5%. And so this is where the debate about how would you set interest rates where you're not quite sure where the level of full employment is. And of course, the problem is if you have unemployment too low, it adds to inflation and keeps interest rates higher for longer than what people might want. And so this is, if you like, almost like a duel, a push me, pull you in some ways, because each of them can dictate where the other ends up. If you have too low unemployment, then inflation stays higher. So therefore, interest rates have to be higher as well. And that is really something there the lobbying and indeed the new Monetary Policy Committee would have to contemplate.
Yeah, just on this, I mean, Labor pretty silent on this sort of significant change before the election. Ditto with the Productivity Commission, which they want to absolutely overhaul as well. Is there a risk that we change the parameters here in relation to the RBA too dramatically, Ross? We get it wrong and we don't take note that, yes, we might be a bit cranky about some comments from Phil Lowe over interest rates, but broadly speaking, we have been incredibly well served as Australians for many decades by the bank, by the strength of our economy. Are we going to perhaps break something that's fixed?
Well, there's subtle changes that come with the new rules for the Reserve Bank, such as the new Monetary Policy Committee that will decide interest rates will not be, shall I say, have a majority of Reserve Bank representatives on that board. It will be outsiders. We know there are new independent directors coming on board, such as Ian Ross, formerly of the Fair Work Commission, coming on board with their expertise in labour markets. So then you've also got the push, and in particular from the ACTU, saying that they would prefer to have higher inflation but lower unemployment. And we know that, you know, lower unemployment is good for the country until the point it creates too much inflation and therefore pushes up the prospect for interest rates. And this is, as I say, the real balancing act that Jim Chalmers has got to get right. And indeed, if he's to navigate this through on a bipartisan basis, he's got to convince the opposition of the merits of that argument.
All right, two things here. We'll leave it here after this question, but two things have collided today. Reports out that we've taken $8 billion out of our savings in June. That's the biggest drawdown since the COVID drawdown, when we all panicked at the top of COVID early 2021, of course. And it's the largest drawdown on record. And now then, over the next 3 months, of course, you've got 150,000 households moving off those low fixed rate mortgages. They'll obviously have to renegotiate, move to much higher rates. How concerned on both these fronts are experts?
They are concerned, and they should be concerned. If you contemplate that an average mortgage in Australia right now is $750,000, and the payments on that, the repayments on that on an annual basis are close to $60,000, which, you know, is almost 2/3 of what the typical average wage would be in this country, that's where you've got some fundamental issues. And then you can see here, say, for example, $1,800 on that mortgage, you're talking the best part of $20,000 a year after tax and extra payments that they've got. Now, that's the reason why people are having to draw down savings, and the household savings ratio is falling rapidly. And therefore, many families are going into dis savings. They're having to dip into other reserves just to keep themselves going. That's the reason, oddly, going back to the previous question, why keeping relatively full employment is so important for so many families, because if they become unemployed, then you've got a real problem in the housing market, which is showing signs of growth if they can't continue to pay their mortgages. And that, if you like, is a problem this government does not want to face.
Ross, thank you.